Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. People who want to lead by example, bring others with them, and who are ready to learn and adapt to deliver brilliant results. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. And today we're going to talk about how your inbox is not your job. When I say inbox, I'm talking about any incoming asynchronous communications, like if you use Slack or if you use Teams, because it is so distracting. It burns up a huge amount of time and distractions, and it can cause quite considerable stress.
Yeah, this is actually one of the most common topics of conversation that I have with coaching clients. I reckon alongside delegation and taking control of your time, and this topic is absolutely top of the list. And it has real potential to lead to overwhelm, not just for the individual, but like organizational level overwhelm, just chaos going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and the irony is, like, I'm going to show my age here, but I remember my first job, we had one email address that we shared between half a dozen of us on the team. And to be fair, I spent quite a lot of my time faxing, and I thought that was boring. And it was boring, but actually it's a lot less stressful than emails coming at you. And now Slack, Teams, other systems as well. They all have the same impact as causing stress and distractions.
Absolutely. So I guess it would be easy for us to start immediately going into tactics for inbox management, but I feel like there's something more in this topic. Do you reckon that there's a mindset element to this first before we dive into the tactics, Lucy?
Yeah, definitely. And what I see in myself and in with a lot of the clients that I work with, that it's a mindset and a culture thing as well. So there's something around being busy that I know that we've talked about before, the badge of busy. So there's something around being busy, and if I'm busy answering my emails and I'm up to date with my emails, then that's a good thing, and I feel better. There's something also around whether culturally it's expected that you reply to your emails, or you're at your desk. That means that you can be sent an email and that you'll reply. I think that is massive, because you can do lots of work to shift how you deal with emails tactically. But if you're caught in a system where there's this big expectation, and if your own brain is saying, I've got to answer things straight away, makes it even harder. What do you think? What do you think about that mindset piece?
Yeah, I completely agree. It feels like you're right. There's a culture, there's an expectation, there's mindset at the kind of individual level. And it's really hard to break out of all of that, because it just feels so natural. It feels like, obviously we're tied to our inbox, whether that's Slack, Teams, email, whatever. Like, it just feels like that is so obviously the way that we need to work, and that the expectations are set up around us that we will be constantly checking those messages, that it feels like breaking out of that mindset is the first big thing to do. One of the things that I found helpful actually is to understand where some of that culture comes from. So there's a really interesting book written by Cal Newport called A World Without Email. And obviously it goes into...
Just the title.
I know, the
title sounds
it does sound wonderful, doesn't it? A World Without Email. And actually in the book he explains why that's actually could be a realistic outcome. I'm not sure how likely an outcome, but still. But what he talks about is how we got ourselves into this mess, basically, how we found ourselves in a situation where we're just tied to these inboxes. And it really resonates with me, and it kind of speaks to some of that culture and that expectation. So his kind of thesis, his hypothesis is that knowledge workers, so when we kind of move on from factory work in the kind of the mid 20th century to the rise of knowledge work, using our brains to produce outcomes, impact that we can then convert into value, those knowledge workers need autonomy to do their best work. And I think all of us have felt that. Like, if we had a manager hovering over us, telling us exactly how to produce the next creative idea, it's not going to be very effective. So they need autonomy. And yet what we've given all knowledge workers is actually the autonomy to also have, to communicate in any way that they wish to. And so email sort of bubbled up from this sense of freedom, of working how you want to. And then what happened basically is this idea that the best way for me to work personally, individually, is every time I have a question that's holding me back from taking the next step on my project, I just need to fire that question at someone in order to get an answer as quickly as
Mm.
possible so that I don't get stuck at this position. I can then move on with my project. But when you've got
Mm-hmm.
multiple people or potentially hundreds of people working in synchronicity kind of toward projects, actually what that ends up with is a situation where for the group, it's a really suboptimal situation where you've got questions being fired at people all the time. They've got this kind of growing expectation that you're going to be responding to those questions spontaneously almost so that you don't hold
Yeah.
anybody else up. There's a performative element of,
Yeah.
I'm busy, I'm performing by emailing back as quickly as I
Yeah.
possibly can. And then you combine into that, actually not something that Cal Newport spends a lot of time on in his book, but you combine into that dopamine hit of checking your inbox.
Mm.
And we've accidentally ended up in a situation where we've got what he calls this hyperactive hive mind, this absolute
Mm-hmm.
hyperactivity of everyone trying to work together to produce these outputs, these impact, this kind of value that you're creating as a team, but that it's actually really inefficient in the group at the group level because we're all distracting each other with our own questions in quite a selfish kind of way.
Yeah.
Does any of that resonate with you? I mean, it resonates with me. There's
Yeah.
a sense of that mindset shift really being needed.
Yeah. That makes absolute sense. I think it's that bit about not wanting to hold somebody else up. So you want to reply as quickly as possible. I think that absolutely chimes with me. And I think that piece around hive mind and that kind of busyness, that perpetual busyness that's really unhelpful for doing deep thinking, focused work, that because you feel busy, you feel like you're achieving something when actually you're all just sort of chasing around at each other's tails.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that really resonates. And I think some of the things that I use with clients is not email. It is some sort of project management system which takes everything off email. I've just been working with a digital expert recently, and they said we're not using email. We're not using email because I can't deal with all of the backwards and forwards on email. It just gets all too much and it's really stressful. We're going to use my system, and they happen to use Trello, and this is how we're going to work. And it's taken me a little bit of time to get used to it, but it means that there's just not emails flying about, getting lost getting lost. You know, when you reply to someone's email while they're replying to you, and then you're at odds with each other, and you know it's kind of quite funny, but the time that burns is significant. And so yeah.
And also the great advantage of those project management systems is that it's then segmented by project. Whereas your inbox, basically, whatever system you're using, where those asynchronous messages all land in one place, it's just a
Yeah.
hodgepodge of internal messages, messages from external clients or customers or partners, quite a lot of spam that still gets through. That it's
Yeah.
just a really inefficient way to collect a huge amount of completely separate information. And
Yeah.
then to feel I mean, I talk to some clients who feel like they're not coping, who feel
Yeah.
that, I should have fixed this by now. I should be able to cope with this. And then when I talk them through, like, kind of, let's quantify the issue, like roughly how many emails are getting a day? It's like 300. And then you talk to them, okay, so how many of those are just, FYI or spam, or, you can just basically, you can either read them or not, but basically not respond. Not that high a percentage. They're actually expected to respond to a huge number of those.
Wow.
And it's just, well, it's not surprising you're feeling like this is overwhelming because it's an absolute overload
Yeah.
of asynchronous communication that how could anyone do a proper creative, innovative, strategic job on all of the important things and simultaneously manage this enormous amount of information that's flowing?
Yeah, because there's not even time in the day to reply to that many emails with the best will
No.
in the world if email is not actually your job. I think there's a couple of things there. I think that with a project management system, it's putting you back in charge of when you will pay attention to that particular project, rather than this feeling that as emails come in at whatever time of day that you need to deal with them quickly. There's also something in there that you said around the amount of emails that this particular client received and the amount of them that were for information and the amount they had to deal with, it sounds like there was quite a chunk of those that they did actually have to deal with. But there's something cultural about copying everybody in.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yes.
that is tiring. And also, I'll tell you what, maybe this doesn't apply now that so many of us are working remotely. But when I worked in an office and I wasn't in the main office and there'd be an all staff email saying there was cakes in the kitchen, that was also something that it was a big distraction, and annoying if I wasn't near the kitchen to go and get some
Yeah.
cake. So yeah, this
I like cake envy as a theme of
yeah,
podcast episodes. Yeah, exactly. No, completely. And I remember a story this is from some time ago. It was a consultant that was doing some work on communications flow. And the case study that they were talking about was how they printed out all of the information that management basically had sent to staff and expected them to read on a weekly basis. I think they printed out everything that had been sent to the staff within 1 month, and it was boxes and boxes and boxes of paper. Now this is many years ago. We wouldn't now print out that amount and feel environmentally
sure, yeah,
sustainable in doing so. But they were trying to make the point. They then invited management into a meeting, said, "This is the amount of information you are sending your staff. This is how much you're expecting them to read." And we calculate it would take, they actually calculated like on an average reading speed, how long it would take these people to read all of this stuff, and said that therefore is costing you. And then they put a financial figure on it. And they said that, how can we make this communication system better? Because you don't want to be wasting that much money. And I wonder whether, although it'd be harder to do, but if you could get a gauge for how many words are coming in in your
yeah,
inbox each day, an average reading speed, multiply it up, and then make some kind of financial calculation for that, that starts to put into scale the negative impact that this organizational culture around email
yes,
potentially is costing
yeah,
you.
and the opportunity cost of the stress of the email, but B, the actual physical time it takes to read it, figure out what you're going to do about it, even if you're going to delete it and or reply to it. What are the things that you're not doing because you're responding to all of that?
Exactly.
And if you're on your email all day, or if you have a little alert that comes up and tells you that something new's arrived, that's pretty much on all day for a 300 a day figure, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
getting anything else done is pretty impossible, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess to come back to the title of the episode, your inbox is not your
Yeah.
job. That mindset shift is around the fact that you are not, I was going to say not being paid. That makes it sound a little bit kind of transactional, but you're not going to have impact just by clearing your inbox. For the vast majority of people, and there are obviously always exceptions, there will be important, deep work, creative, strategic, whatever it might be, work that you are responsible for delivering, which is very unlikely to be delivered by rooting yourself in an inbox.
Yeah.
Like, I guess that's the mindset shift, isn't it, that we were
Yeah.
talking about?
So in terms of sort of practical tactics to help people shift from I've got all these emails that I've got to respond to emails not my core of my job where I'm making the impact, what are the sorts of thinking processes that might help with that shift of mindset?
So I think one of the big ones that I've seen work for me and work for clients is the frequency with which you're going to check your inbox.
Yeah.
So I think working on your habits, your diary blocking, whatever you want to do, which constrains the number of times you check those inboxes. Now, different frequencies will be right for different people because it very much depends on what your role is, but really thinking through and talking through with colleagues as well, what is needed here. Personally, I check mine. I do a quick triage first thing in the morning. So I do check my email first thing in the morning. Some people don't, which is
I love how
admirable.
systematic you are with triaging your emails. I love it. Love it.
So I go through all the emails that have been received and I star anything that I need to take action on. If I'm really short of time, I will actually only read the subject lines and who it's from and star it before it's even been opened, meaning I need to open this later. But that enables me to then see the scale of the problem. And a fair amount of it actually is just absolute rubbish and I can completely ignore or have a very quick glance at, realize that this isn't something that needs action, or at least not immediately, and ignore. I use the starring system. So I use a Gmail
Yeah.
inbox. I use the starring system. I don't use folders anymore. I used to, but the functionality for search is so sophisticated now, I find it easier not to file things into folders, although I know some people who do and find that very effective. So I think there's something first off around the frequency that you check your email and then having some kind of triage process. Does, is
Yeah.
that kind of something that you've discovered as well? That's not just
Yes.
me and the people that I
No,
work with.
it's not. So similar. I do this. I do the same. I've just never caused it triage before. So I look at my emails, not first thing, because I first thing is when I do my best work. So I'm a lark up early, so I do a couple of hours. Then I tend to look at email, and yeah, I do triage, and I look at what I've got to respond to, and I look at the things that don't need a response straight away. I also work hard to unsubscribe from things that are not helpful rather than just delete them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well done.
thank you.
You're better at me at that.
Wow, you should see some of the stuff that arrives in my inbox. So I do that, and then I revisit again towards the end of the day. There is a line of thought around
Yeah.
like if you've bothered to open it, it's more effective just to reply to it. And that I kind of try and do my best to stick to that. But sometimes things warrant a little bit of a longer response, and they just need a little bit more time to do that. Same as you, I don't have folders. I remember once being on a call to a creative agency that I was working with, and I was looking for some files, and they were like, where do you think you put it? And I was like, I don't know, I filed it away somewhere really efficiently. And they were like, wherever you're looking now is where you need to file it in future. And I was just in my inbox. So either I search on the basis that I've sent something to someone or someone sent something to me, and that's it. And then what I
Yeah.
do quite a lot, and I encourage my clients to do as well, is to have an out of office, use really good use of an out of office for day to day. So, if you're anxious about, well, I'm supposed to be at my desk doing email, and if I'm only going to check it twice a day, then I'm going to get into trouble, or I'm going to feel really anxious about it and it's going to get in my way. So I check my emails at 9:30 and I check them again at 4:30. If there's something so urgent that in between that time you need a response from me, give me a call. And that can kind of just release a bit of anxiety. So yeah, I deal with them in very much the same way. And there's definitely something around just because it's arrived in my inbox, it's up to me when I respond to
Yeah.
it. It doesn't mean because it's there, I have to reply straight away, which is different. You have kind of standard operating procedures where you get back to people within 24 hours. I mean, I'm talking here like I aim to get back to everybody within 24
Yeah.
hours. Doesn't mean to say I have to be back to them within the first hour that they've sent me the thing.
That's my guiding principle too. And I think as well that the mindset shift around understanding that your inbox is basically these days it's pretty much open to the world, to be completely honest. If your email is anywhere on the internet, anybody could email you. So you wouldn't just open up your to-do list or your priorities list for the week or the month to anybody in the world and then expect there to be an efficient allocation of your time.
Exactly.
So, and yet we do allow people to do that with our email, with our inboxes, because if you were responding within an hour, that means you need to be checking really frequently, which is a constant distraction.
Mm.
And then you're allowing other people's priorities to be more important than your own. Now, I like what you just said there about there being a separate way of getting in touch if there is something urgent. I think that can be really important, especially if you're working within a team where sometimes things are urgent and they do need a quick response. So maybe there's a kind of a priority communications channel that you can be got kind of found at any time within working hours, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, I think within 24 hours seems perfectly reasonable. And there's a definite sense that the more quickly you email them, the more quickly they email back. Now, now I'm not sure that it's necessarily the best tactic to always advise slow response in order to get a slow response back. But I think all of us will have felt the feeling of, oh, I finally emptied my my stars or empty my inbox if you're doing inbox zero. Finally got to the bottom of the list, only to look up again and discover that 30 people have replied already.
Yeah, it's devastating. But I kind of so your email comes in, you check it at whatever times, and you respond based on the urgency of the requests that you're getting. I do think that there is a case for sometimes just sitting back and letting the conversation play out. If you don't have an immediate answer that's going to close down all the rest of the email correspondence, I do think you can sit back, because how many times have you gone for lunch or come back the
Yeah,
next day and that email flurry, it's a flurry, has
yeah,
sorted itself out and you haven't had to intervene and you can just delete everything. So the more you reply, the more flurry you're creating. And that is not always necessary for you
exactly.
or for the other people. It's a massive part of my learning because, I have done quite a lot of work on myself around email correspondence. And I used to be the person that replied straight away.
Mm.
And I didn't used to get enough else done. And I know that for me working on my own, it is easier for me to be autonomous about how I choose to manage my email. And I acknowledge that if you work within a system, it can be different because you have different expectations from different teams,
Yeah,
but you can manage those expectations. It doesn't mean to say you have to keep
yeah, exactly.
perpetuating those expectations by responding really quickly. You could set the you could set the standard and you can do a favor for everyone else that is going under because they are just swamped by
Exactly. And that's
emails.
what your away message helps to do, is to set an expectation. And that's going out
Yeah.
automatically to everybody, but there also might be proactive conversations that you can have within your team or other teams that you work with closely, particular stakeholders that you work with, to set those expectations up,
Yeah.
especially if it's a new relationship, a new customer relationship or something like that. Make that part of your onboarding process. So there's an
Mm,
understanding about how quickly things will be responded to. And if you're using a project management system, make sure that that's understood, that that's the way that we're going to be working together. And if it's internal, and actually quite a lot of this is internal. I have to say, when I've spoken to
mm,
people, one of the things that I ask them often is not just quantifying the total amount of email, but actually like roughly how much of this is coming internally and externally. And then from external, is it partnerships, like people that you're voluntarily working with externally where you want to be involved, as opposed to external and they're just coming in to you kind of without invitation, as it were.
yeah.
And when you categorize it, a lot of it is internal. So a lot of the expectation setting and conversations can be led internally to just start to tweak and shift the culture.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you mentioned there around kind of setting expectations, it can also be sometimes that idea that you're going to respond quickly to everything can also be linked to a sense of learned helplessness, in the sense that if you're either an actual hierarchical leader, in the sense you have power within the hierarchy
Mm,
to lead, or if you are a knowledge holder, so you're a leader of a particular process or a particular activity because you hold knowledge on that. One of the things that we often slip into, and I am as guilty of this as everybody else, is to think that if I just respond quickly, then they know the information that they need to get
yeah.
on. But actually, if they figure it out themselves, they'll have figured it out themselves permanently, and they won't keep coming back to you because you're the only holder of that knowledge. So to sit back and wait sometimes is
Yeah.
also a good counteraction or counteracting kind of power to that sense of learned helplessness, and constantly stepping in to help somebody in a way that actually isn't helpful for them in the long term.
Yeah. And it's not just that one thing that you're providing the answer to. It ends up that you get into that dynamic when everyone always looks to you for the answer. And
Yeah,
that's not great for others' learning and development, and it's not great for the use of your time. So it's not being mean, holding back on getting involved in a flurry,
mm-hmm.
but it's thinking about why you're holding back and what the end result is that you want to get. And I think there's something as well about, we're talking here about emails coming into your inbox and you feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of them and the need to respond. We've all got a responsibility, and to have that little thought that goes, do I need to send this? Do I need to send this now? Um,
Yeah.
could that reduce the amount of email traffic
Yeah.
by not getting involved? Like, I mean, I'm going to liken it to like the street WhatsApp group where the world and his literally the world and his dog get involved for like one question about what time does little Tesco's close. It's not needed. If the person had just looked up a previous conversation or what time little Tesco's closed on the internet, they could have solved it for themselves. So next
Yes.
time you're getting involved in an email flurry, go, what if this was your street WhatsApp group? How would you feel about it? I'm making some assumptions here about street WhatsApp groups, but everyone I've spoken to seems to have a similar challenge.
Yes. Yes. I'm going to say no more because some of my street might be listening, but yes, 100%.
Ah, little
um,
Tesco's closes at 10, by the way.
exactly. Oh, does it? Oh, good to
Yeah.
know. Okay, good to know. Next time I'm nearby. Exactly. And I think the other thing to mention as well is that everybody has the ability to make little tweaks to the culture
Yeah.
around them. And if you're listening and you've got a little bit more sway around the systems that you put in place for your team, or you have influence over those who do have the power to change the systems, I would definitely recommend thinking about an internal project management system. So, Lucy, you
Mm,
mentioned Trello. I know a lot of clients of mine also use Asana, which I've not used
yes.
before, but I've heard is good.
Yeah.
The one that I use that I absolutely love is called ClickUp. And Lucy, you've used that a little bit when we've been
Yeah.
collaborating together as well. It almost doesn't matter what system you use, so don't get bogged down in system choice paralysis, but just start using something for some kind of small project and just see how it feels for the team,
Mm.
because even just small things can be made a lot more efficient when there is a project management system that holds the information about one project in one place, and then that
And then
that for the internal email flurry can massively make a difference actually.
I think what's helpful that goes with that choice of um, project management system is a conversation around how we're going to use this and why we're
Yeah.
doing it like this. And this means that, you know, our standard operating procedure is that we will check it once a day, or we will you'll get a response within 24 hours from the thing that you're working on, or you might agree that you'll all work on it at a particular time. But I think that that kind of why we're doing it like this is a bit of a test, and how it's going to work is helpful context as well as the tech, which is
100%.
is important as
Yeah.
well.
And that's the conversation that actually starts to shift culture. Like the tech is
Yeah,
almost irrelevant. It's actually the way we're going to do it and the why we're doing it this way, and of course
yeah.
involving as many people as is appropriate to kind of curate that new culture, that new SOP about how you're going to be doing things is actually just
Mm,
as important as the actual
mm.
tech that you're using. So Lucy, we need to kind of wrap up our conversation. What are the key things that we want people to take away?
But I love talking about email. So the things, I think that there's something around really smart use of your out of office. So we've talked about, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you could do something around I'm good checking my email at 9:30 and 4:30. That also applies to when you are away for the day or a week or on holiday. To really smart use of your out of office. And you know, you can share things like, you know, maybe it's that you got a dentist appointment, so you're not going to be there an afternoon and a morning because you're having fillings. It's all there's a bit of opportunity to build
Yeah,
rapport in there as well, but be very clear that there's not going to be a response until the following afternoon. I have one client that when they go on holiday, they set an out of office that says something like, I'm on holiday, I'm back on this date. Anything that you send me between this date and this date, I'm going to delete. If what you sent me is important and it still needs a response on this date, send it again.
yeah.
Bit of bravery needed, but that worked extremely well, both for them and for the people
Mhm.
sending. So good use of out of office, but that confidence to give it a go, and that confidence to be able to step away from your email because you know that what you're aiming to do is to make more impact by not almost being
Yeah,
a slave to your email.
yeah.
Those would be my two things: out of office and build your confidence.
No, I think that confidence step is really important. Having the confidence to step away from the email, a lot of it comes from that mindset shift. So Us telling you to list change your mindset isn't going to work. Sorry to break it to you. But what you can do is listen to what we're saying. Think about the things that resonate. Think about the wording that you want to use, the way that you want to remind yourself on a post-it note on your desk. But what is it that's going to help you to feel confident to step away from email based on the knowledge that being attached to your email is not likely to be the most effective use of your time at delivering that impact that you're trying to deliver? And then trying out different things. So yeah, out of office, I think conversations around expectations, switching off notifications. Please switch off your notifications. I see no reason to have notifications on the desktop. And then yeah, just trying out different things and seeing when's the best time of day, how quickly you plan to respond to people, setting those expectations and having those conversations. But it's as much about mindset as it is about tactics, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So that's it for this time. We love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear what has resonated with you in this episode and any of the actions that you're planning to take as a result. Maybe you're left with questions. Let us know. And you might have different tactics or a different point of view or a challenge that we haven't thought of.
Or if you've tried it and it's worked, let us know. Or if you've tried it and it hasn't worked so well, let us know.
Yeah,
all of that insight
know.
is really helpful for us.
Absolutely. And if this conversation has been helpful, do share the episode with a friend and subscribe on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. So thank you for spending this time with us. Don't forget that if you want to make your voice heard and our impact felt, then we need to gift ourselves the space to think, the courage to lead, and the confidence to adapt. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. We hope you'll join us next time for the Quiet Leadership Revolution.